The cold November air nipped at my cheeks as I approached the open field, the scent of burning wood filling my nostrils. Families and friends huddled around the roaring bonfire, their faces illuminated by its warm glow. Children laughed, their breath visible in the chilly air as they chased each other with sparklers. The distant booms of fireworks echoed, painting the night sky with bursts of color. I hadn't been back to this town since that fateful night in 1998. The memories, though buried deep, were as vivid as the flames before me. I could still hear Lily's laughter, see the excitement in her eyes as we planned our future adventures. But all that changed in an instant. Taking a deep breath, I tried to shake off the past and focus on the present. I was here to face my demons, not run from them. As I settled on a log near the fire, an elderly woman approached, her face a map of wrinkles, eyes sharp as ever. "Jessica Davies? Is that really you?" she exclaimed, her voice filled with surprise. "Mrs. Thompson," I replied, recognizing my old school teacher. "It's been a long time." She nodded, her gaze sympathetic. "After what happened, we never thought we'd see you here again." I forced a smile, not wanting to delve into that dark chapter. Life has a way of bringing us back to where we started. As we chatted, I couldn't help but scan the crowd. The faces were familiar, yet strangers. Time had changed them, just as it had changed me. But amidst the sea of faces, one stood out. A man, around my age, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to recognize me. He approached, his steps hesitant. "Jessica?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I nodded, searching my memory. "Robert?" He smiled, relief evident in his eyes. "It's been years. I wasn't sure you'd remember." "How could I forget?" I replied, the weight of our shared past evident in my voice. We exchanged pleasantries, but the unspoken memories hung between us like a thick fog. The night was progressing, and with each passing moment, the unease in my heart grew. The bonfire's flames danced, casting eerie shadows that seemed to whisper of the horrors of that night. As the crowd began to thin, Robert leaned in, his voice low. "I've been tracking it, Jessica. It's back." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November air. "Are you sure?" He nodded gravely. "We need to be prepared." The memories, once suppressed, now flooded back with a vengeance. The laughter, the joy, and then the terror. The beast that emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with malevolence. Lily's scream, her life cut short. And my own narrow escape, forever scarred by the events of that night. As the last of the fireworks lit up the sky, a realization dawned on me. I was back, not just to face my past, but to confront the monster that had haunted my dreams for 25 years. The bonfire's embers glowed dimly, casting a soft orange hue over the dwindling crowd. The once lively chatter had reduced to hushed whispers, and the cold seemed to seep deeper into my bones. Robert and I sat in silence, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. "I've spent years researching Jessica," Robert began, his voice barely above a whisper. "After that night, I couldn't just move on. I needed answers." I nodded, understanding his obsession all too well. My own life had taken a similar trajectory, delving into folklore and myths, searching for a way to protect myself and others. Robert continued, "Every bonfire night, there are reports of attacks. Not just here, but in other towns, too. It's always the same. A creature, half man, half beast, preying on the unsuspecting." I shivered, recalling the monstrous form that had emerged from the woods that night. But why? Why only on bonfire night? "That's what I've been trying to figure out," Robert replied, frustration evident in his voice. "There's a legend, an old tale that speaks of a curse. A man, wronged by his village, seeking revenge. On the night of November 5th, he transforms, his humanity lost, replaced by an insatiable hunger." I pondered over his words, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together. "So you believe this werewolf, this creature, is someone from our town?" Robert nodded gravely. It's the only explanation, and I think I know who it is. I leaned in, anticipation building. Who? Before Robert could answer, a scream pierced the night. We both jumped to our feet, our eyes scanning the darkness. Another scream, closer this time, followed by a guttural growl. Without a word, Robert and I began to move towards the source of the noise. The woods loomed ahead, the trees casting long, menacing shadows. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sent my heart racing. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the memories became more vivid. The same path, the same eerie silence, and the same sense of impending doom. I could almost hear Lily's laughter, see her bright eyes, full of life and promise. We reached a clearing, and the sight that met our eyes sent a chill down my spine. A figure, hunched over, its form obscured by the darkness. But the glowing eyes, filled with malice, were unmistakable. Robert and I exchanged a glance, the same thought running through our minds. We needed to act, and fast. Drawing from my years of research, I began to recite an old incantation, one that was said to repel supernatural creatures. The words flowed, their power evident in the way the creature recoiled. But it wasn't enough. The werewolf lunged, its razor-sharp claws aimed straight at me. I braced myself, but the impact never came. Robert, with a strength I hadn't known he possessed, tackled the creature, sending them both tumbling to the ground. The struggle was intense, each trying to gain the upper hand. I knew I had to help, but how? Then it hit me. The silver pendant I wore, a gift from my grandmother. Legends spoke of silver's power over werewolves. Without hesitation, I lunged, driving the pendant deep into the creature's flesh. A deafening howl filled the air, echoing through the woods as the werewolf writhed in pain. The werewolf's agonized howls echoed through the forest, its once menacing form now writhing in pain. The silver pendant, embedded deep in its flesh, seemed to burn with an ethereal glow. Robert and I watched, a mix of horror and relief, as the creature's transformation began. Its once hulking form started to shrink, the coarse fur receding to reveal human skin beneath. The snarling muzzle contorted, reshaping into a human face, eyes filled with pain and recognition. As the final howls faded into whimpers, the creature's transformation was complete. Lying before us, battered and bruised, was a man we both recognized. "Mr. Harrison?" I whispered, disbelief evident in my voice. The town's librarian, a quiet, unassuming man, was the last person I'd have suspected. Robert knelt beside him, checking for signs of life. "He's alive, but barely. We need to get him help." I nodded, still trying to process the revelation. "But why? Why him?" Robert sighed, his face etched with sadness. "I found old records dating back to the 1800s. Mr. Harrison's ancestor was the one wronged by the village. The curse has been passed down through generations." The weight of our actions pressed down on me. Had we just condemned an innocent man, trapped by a curse he had no control over? As we made our way back to the bonfire, Mr. Harrison in tow, the town's residents gathered around, their faces a mix of shock and relief. The legend of the bonfire night beast had haunted them for years, and now, it seemed, the mystery was finally solved. But as the first rays of dawn broke, another realization hit me. The pendant, the very thing that had saved us, was now lost, embedded deep within Mr. Harrison, and with it, any hope of breaking the curse. The days that followed were a blur. Mr. Harrison was hospitalized, his condition critical. The town was abuzz with rumors and speculations, the legend of the bonfire night beast now a chilling reality. Robert and I, bound by our shared experience, grew closer. We spent hours poring over old records, searching for a way to break the curse. But every lead, every glimmer of hope, led to a dead end. As the days turned into weeks, Mr. Harrison's condition worsened. The transformation, it seemed, had taken a toll on his body. And with each passing day, the weight of our actions, the guilt of condemning an innocent man, grew heavier. One evening, as Robert and I sat in the town's library, a soft voice broke the silence. "You seek a way to break the curse?" We turned, our eyes meeting those of an elderly woman, her face a map of wrinkles, eyes sharp as ever. It was Mrs. Thompson, my old school teacher. She handed us a worn-out book, its pages yellowed with age. "This has been in my family for generations. It speaks of the curse and a way to break it." We eagerly flipped through the pages, our eyes scanning the ancient text. And there it was, a ritual, a way to break the curse. But it came at a cost. The ritual required a sacrifice, a willing soul to take the place of the cursed. The weight of the decision pressed down on us. Could we condemn another to a fate worse than death? As the next bonfire night approached, the town was on edge. The fear, the anticipation, was palpable. And as the first howls echoed through the night, we knew our decision would shape the fate of the town and its residents. The town was eerily silent as bonfire night approached once again. The once joyous occasion was now tainted with fear and anticipation. The streets, usually bustling with families and children, were deserted. The only sound was the distant howl of the wind, carrying with it the weight of our decision. Robert and I stood at the edge of the woods, the same spot where it all began. The ritual, as described in Mrs. Thompson's book, had to be performed at the exact location of the first attack. As the clock struck midnight, we began. The ritual was complex, requiring a mix of ancient chants and offerings, but the most crucial part was the sacrifice. A willing soul, ready to take on the curse to save another. As the final chant echoed through the woods, I stepped forward, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. But before I could, a hand grabbed mine, pulling me back. It was Robert. "I can't let you do this, Jessica," he whispered, tears in his eyes. "You've suffered enough." Before I could protest, he stepped into the circle, taking my place. The ground trembled, the air thick with tension. A blinding light enveloped Robert, and when it faded, he was gone. In his place stood a creature, half man, half beast, its eyes filled with pain and recognition. The weight of our actions, the realization of what we had done, hit me like a ton of bricks. We had saved Mr. Harrison, but at what cost? The days that followed were a blur. The town, once paralyzed with fear, now celebrated our victory. Mr. Harrison, fully recovered, returned to his duties as the librarian, forever grateful for our actions. But the joy was short-lived. Every bonfire night, the town would gather, not in celebration, but in remembrance. A tribute to Robert, the hero who sacrificed himself to save another. And as the years passed, the legend of the bonfire night beast became just that, a legend. But for me, the pain, the guilt, never faded. Every night I would sit by the edge of the woods, hoping, praying for a sign. A sign that Robert was still out there, that he was okay. And then, one fateful night, as the clock struck midnight, a familiar figure emerged from the woods. It was Robert, or at least what was left of him. The curse, it seemed, had taken its toll. We sat in silence, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice filled with pain. "I never wanted this for you." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "But we did what we had to." As the first rays of dawn broke, Robert turned to leave, his form slowly fading into the woods. But before he disappeared, he turned, his eyes meeting mine one last time. "Remember me," he whispered, his voice filled with pain and longing. And as the years passed, I did. Every bonfire night I would sit by the edge of the woods, waiting, hoping for a sign that Robert was still out there watching over us. The years seemed to blur together, each bonfire night a haunting reminder of the sacrifice made and the love lost. The town had moved on, the legend of the bonfire night beast now a distant memory, told to children as a cautionary tale. But for me, the pain, the guilt, remained as fresh as ever. The woods, once a place of joy and adventure, now held a sinister allure. Every year, as the 5th of November approached, I would find myself drawn to them, hoping, praying for a sign. A sign that Robert was still out there, that he was at peace. One fateful night, as the clock struck midnight, I ventured deep into the woods, the familiar path now overgrown with weeds and brambles. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence deafening. And then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It was Robert, or at least a shadow of his former self. The curse had changed him, his once vibrant eyes now hollow, his face etched with pain. But there was still a glimmer of recognition, a hint of the man he once was. We stood in silence, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I never wanted this for you." Robert smiled, a sad, wistful smile. "It's not your fault," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "We did what we had to." As we stood there, lost in our memories, a soft glow began to emanate from the ground. The woods, once dark and foreboding, were now bathed in a soft, ethereal light. And as the light grew brighter, figures began to emerge. It was the spirits of those who had been lost to the curse, their souls trapped in limbo, unable to move on. Among them was Lily, her once vibrant eyes now filled with sadness. She approached, her steps hesitant. "Jessica," she whispered, her voice filled with pain and longing. "It's been so long." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry," I replied, my voice choked with emotion. "I never wanted this for any of us." Lily smiled, a sad, wistful smile. "It's not your fault," she replied, echoing Robert's words. "We all made our choices." As the night wore on, the spirits began to fade, their souls finally at peace. And as the first rays of dawn broke, Robert turned to leave, his form slowly fading into the woods. But before he disappeared, he turned, his eyes meeting mine one last time. "Remember me," he whispered, his voice filled with pain and longing. And as the years passed, I did. Every bonfire night I would sit by the edge of the woods, waiting, hoping for a sign that Robert was still out there, watching over us. But as the years turned into decades, the memories began to fade, replaced by the harsh realities of life. The town, once vibrant and full of life, was now a shadow of its former self. The legend of the bonfire night beast, a distant memory. And as I sat by the edge of the woods, the weight of the years pressing down on me, I realized that some memories are best left in the past. For while the pain may fade, the scars remain, a haunting reminder of the choices we made and the love we lost.